Good evening, friends. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope at the end of it, you would have felt that it was time well spent in listening to the life of Krishnaswami Aiyar. When I was very young, I remember going around with my grandmother, and almost everything in Mylapore, according to her, was built by Krishnaswami Aiyar. So it was a name that kind of stuck to memory. And many years later, when my parents were transferred to Assam, we went to the temple of Kamakhya. And I remember my mother telling me, do you remember in Luster's Road corner, there is a house called Kamakhya? Because Mr. Venkatramani, who is the son of or grandson of Krishnaswami Aiyar, worked here in the railways. I said, my God, this family is never going to leave us. And sure enough, when I came back here, among my first friends was Justice Prabhasri David. And since then I have been, proud to know several other members of the family. And I consider it a great privilege to be here to speak about this great son of, I would not call, I think Madras or Mylapore is too limiting a canvas to describe Krishnaswami Aiyar. I would say this great son of India. I think that is the best description that we could give. So, Krishnaswami Aiyar's life begins in Tirumale. His father, Venkatram, this is incidentally Krishnaswami Aiyar himself, because I have not been able to get a photograph of his parents. His father, Venkatram Aiyar, was in the lower judiciary. He was a munsif, and the family came from Arividi Mangalam. But he was born in the house of his maternal uncle in Tiruvide on June 15, 1863. And his elder brother was Swaminathan. The father lost his wife when the children were young and married again, and had two more sons. And Krishnaswami Aiyar, from what I have been able to read, incidentally his biographers are essentially two people. One is his own son, K. Chandrasekharan, who wrote a book, and the other is Uve Swaminatha Aiyar, who shared his reminiscences of Krishnaswami Aiyar, which were later translated into English by Dr. Premananda Kumar. And I'm told that one of his daughters also had left behind reminiscence of her young days, but I haven't read that. But a very fascinating character portrait of Krishnaswami Aiyar comes from his close friend and companion who studied with him in school, in college, enrolled in the judiciary, in law together, practiced together, became judges, and of course lived much after him, P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar. And I'll be reading out a couple of paragraphs from what P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar writes about his close friend. And you can see that when he wrote his reminiscences of Krishnaswami Aiyar, he's been more a friend than an admirer. So he gives you multiple colors of this personality that you don't find in any other work on his life. So having studied initially at Kumbakonam, and at Tanjavur, this is the Kumbakonam government school where he studied. Before that, he studied his matriculation at the SPG school in Tanjavur. And I'll come back to the SPG school because it's got a connection that comes back to him much later in life. And then having studied here, he moves on, and during the time that he was in Kumbakonam and Tanjavur, P.S. Sivaswami Aiyar, as I told you earlier, was his classmate, and the two of them studied together. In 1878, when Krishnaswami Aiyar must have been 15, this classmate of his was instrumental in getting him married off. That is because the family was looking for a suitable bride for Krishnaswami Aiyar, and Tiruvalangadu Ramaswamy Shastrikal was a great Sanskrit scholar. Sivaswamy Aiyar was learning Sanskrit from him, and the horoscopes came, and apparently the Guru asked his disciple, what do you think of this boy? And apparently Sivaswami Aiyar said, he is one of the best, and you should get your daughter married off to my friend. And that is how Balambal married Krishnaswami Aiyar. So a classmate in those days being instrumental in getting his friend married off. Then the two of them, the two friends, come to Madras, where they enroll in the law college. And the law college at that time did not exist where it stands today. It was in the Presidency College. The Presidency College in the 1880s was where all other degree courses were also being offered in individual classrooms, and Krishnaswami Aiyar and Sivaswami Aiyar both came here to study. This was in 1882. And having come here, they found that the English diction of most of the professors was beyond comprehension. In fact, Srivaswami Aiyar writes that the beard of Dr. Shepherd was so thick that most of the words that he spoke used to get lost in them. So the two friends rarely spent time in class. They spent most of their time in the beach. And according to Srivaswami Aiyar, one of the fascinating things was the Krakatoa volcano had exploded at that time. So the sun was green in color on the Marina beach. So this was something that they used to go and spend time watching, and they spent most of their time on the Marina. But this is where the two differed. Srivaswami Aiyar had a careful regimen of studies in his spare time, while B. Krishnaswami Aiyar absorbed the happenings in the city. As a result, when they finished their law, Srivaswami Aiyar stood first and B. Krishnaswami Aiyar passed with second class in law. And apparently, he took an oath at that time to say that, the class or the grade just doesn't matter. I will show to the world what I can do in the field of law, despite my not having got a first class or a gold medal. So, both of them, this is a portrait of Krishnaswami Aiyar's wife, Balambar, and the two of them take up residence in Palatho, which is where in those days, later, some of the most top-ranking lawyers and judges came from Palatho, but in those days, that was where the struggling lawyers lived. And the husband and wife, they live in rented accommodation over there, and they are essentially dependent on the money that the elder brother is sending them from wherever he is. He's working as a munsif as well, Swaminatha Aiyar. And one day the wife buys flowers on a Friday evening to adorn her hair. And Krishnaswami Aiyar, having come home after another frustrating day because he is not yet very successful in the world of law, he takes the flowers and flings them out onto the garbage tip because he says that these things are not necessary with borrowed money. The day we can afford it, we can take to having all these adornments. Till such a time, I don't think it is necessary. But prior to that, he and Srivaswami Aiyar both have enrolled themselves under R. Balaji Rao, after whom Balaji Nagar is named. He was one of the biggest lawyers of his time and notoriously parsimonious as well. So there was not much coming from Balaji Rao, so they still managed. But the great kindness that they expect from Balaji Rao, they actually get from Sir S. Subramanya Aiyar. Then not yet knighted, but just Mr. Subramanya Aiyar, who this was in 1884. When they are still juniors, and then in 1885 they get their sanad for practicing as independent vakils. But it is just around 6 years since Subramanya Aiyar has moved to Madras from Madurai, where he had been practicing earlier. But he is already the top-ranking lawyer of Madras at that time. He is the senior most. And under him, it is a great privilege for people to enroll as juniors. And one of them, who is a junior of Sir S. Subramanya Aiyar, is P.R. Sundara Aiyar, with whom Krishnaswami Aiyar becomes very close. In fact, they are referred to as the Siamese twins ever after in the annals of the High Court of Madras, because they were inseparable. So the friendship with Srivaswami Aiyar kind of takes a backseat, and it becomes more a friendship with P.R. Sundara Aiyar from then on. And the first 3 years, apparently between 1885 and 1888, were very difficult. And apparently it is said that when he would have his meals and then go to throw the leaves outside, he would carefully look through the door to ensure that no client was coming down, because he would be able to see how little the family ate, and would then realize that this is not a lawyer with a great practice and he may go away from them. So the first 3 years were extremely difficult. And then what happens is he has a windfall in 1888 when a lawyer called A. Rangaswamy Aiyar becomes a munsif. And when he becomes a munsif, he hands over all his pending cases to Krishnaswamy Aiyar and says that you take this and you start practicing from now on. So he becomes an independent lawyer from then on. And A. Rangaswamy Aiyar also writes very carefully what is the amount due from every client, which he can now claim as his own for practicing. So he takes over those case bundles, so to speak, or case papers, and sets off, the first case being in Kadalur. So once he goes there, he wins the case, and people take notice of the fact that there is a new star in their midst as far as the legal firmament is concerned. And from then on, there is no looking back as far as his legal career is concerned. So, having lived in Talato, within 3-4 years, the couple has moved to South Mada Street, to fairly independent, to an independent house. So it's a sign of rising affluence. And P.R. Sundarayar is also rising in the world of law, so he also moves to South Mada Street. The two of them become neighbors there as well. And it is an indication of his rising greatness that within 5 years of his becoming a lawyer, he is pitted against the greatest name in Madras law, Sir V. Bhashim Iyengar. The two of them meet each other on opposite sides of the bench at Chirgari, where there is a case going on related to an estate in that area, and V. Krishnaswami Aiyar defeats Bhashim Iyengar in that case. The judgment is given in favor of V. Krishnaswami Aiyar. And such were those times that despite having been trounced by a young rival, there was no ill will or hard feeling between the two. They were to become the closest of friends. This is something that is impossible in today's world, where they would have spent the rest of their time trying to dig the other man's grave. But this was not so then. And this is incidentally still standing. The reason why I bring this up is that this is Beach House, which is now a part of Queen Mary's College campus. This is where Sir S. Subramania Iyer lived when he was a lawyer, and later when he became a judge of the Madras High Court. Today the PWD and the Queen Mary's College and everybody else is doing their best to demolish the building by neglecting it as far as possible. And may their hopes not succeed, but this is where V. Krishnaswami Iyer must have come. This is where P.R. Sundarayar must have gone. This is where they would have experienced all the kindness that they were to get from Sir Subramania Iyer. And a part of this training of Sir Subramania Iyer, see today we talk about HR and things like that. This man did it even then. He had what was called the Saturday Club. On Saturdays, young lawyers would come to his house. They would take the judgments of the previous week. They would discuss it among themselves and they would debate the merits and demerits on the basis of which the judgments were given. And this is how they kind of honed their debating skills in this particular place. And the court where they practiced is not the High Court that we see today. This building also does not stand now. This is where the Collectorate of Madras is on First Line Beach. This is called Singaravelar Madike today, but in those days this was known as Penting's building, and this is where the High Court of Madras was. This is where these people as young lawyers must have gone to practice. And having started off, even before he became a success in the world of law, he was to show that he was a holy terror as far as humbug and unfair practices were concerned. So in those days, one of the traditions of the High Court was that if you were a barrister qualifying from the Temple's Inns of London, you could wear a gown and enter the court. Whereas if you were a native lawyer, a vakil, you didn't wear a gown. The privilege of wearing a gown was not given to you. And the usher of the court could not recognize whether these people were vakils or whether they were members of the general public coming in to attend a case. So the usher would shoo these people away. So it was great indignity for these people to go every time and identify themselves to the usher and say, no, I have come here to fight this case, I should be let in, and things like that. So he begins an agitation with the Vakils Association, of which he was a member, saying that they must be given the right to wear the same gowns as the barristers. So at that time you had a Chief Justice of Madras, Sir Arthur Collins, and he detested the barrister community because they used to look down upon him as Chief Justice, because he was not considered to be a great judge of his time. So he decided that this was the way he was going to spite the barrister community, and he said this is fine, all the vakils can wear the gowns from now on. But had it not been for V. Krishnaswami Iyer, this would have never happened. And so they got the privilege of wearing the same gowns as the barristers. Sir S. Subramania Iyer later to become a judge in 1895. And it was also in the house of Sir S. Subramania Iyer that they started off what was called the Madras Law Journal. This was in 1891, and incidentally this was not the first law journal of India. The first one was called the Madras Jurist and started in 1861 by a man called Sharlip in Madras, whose wife was to become a great gynecologist, Mary Darcombe Sharlip, and who gave birth to Sister Subbulakshmi through the first forceps delivery in the history of Madras city. So if Sharlib had not been there, there would have been no Mary Dapo. If Mary Dapo had not been there, there wouldn't have been a Sister Subbulakshmi, there wouldn't have been widow remarriage, and so on and so forth. But Sharlib left Madras in the 1880s, so that magazine floundered. And then came the Indian Jurist, which survived for a very short while. Then came the Madras Law Journal in 1891, started by Sriram Ramaswamy Mudaliar, along with S. Subramanya Aiyar, V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar, and P.R. Sundar Aiyar. In fact, these were the original editors of the Madras Law Journal, and as though it has changed hands now, it still continues. So it is the longest surviving law journal of the entire country. And of course, as we all know, it existed in Mundakaniyamman Kovil Street on a fairly large property. Later it shifted, and of course now it's controlled by the Vadhva group, the Nexus group in Delhi. Bashim Iyengar's statue, as it stands outside the Madras High Court, who, as I said, was defeated in the first court case and later became a very, very close friend of V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar. When Bashim Iyengar became a judge, there was a rule that judges had to retire at the age of 60. And Bashim Iyengar had served just for 2 years when the rule was going to come into effect and he would have to step down. V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar began an agitation saying that Bashim Iyengar should be kept on as a judge, and got other people to send pamphlets, letters to the High Court. Finally, the government gave him a 9-month extension, but at the end of it, he stepped down. The reason is he found that the income as a judge was far lower than the income of a lawyer, and he wanted to get back to practice law. Having retired, the next day he was in Madras High Court as a lawyer, and that is when the courts passed the law that you cannot function as a lawyer in the same court as where you had been a judge. So that was the first time that that particular law was made. Bashim Iyengar, of course, as I said, was a great patron of V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar. And during the 1880s, in a place which is known as Vishwakamal Apartments today and is probably one of the ugliest buildings in what is a fairly ugly city, in R.K. Math Road, was where Krishna Vilas used to be. Krishna Vilas was the house of Diwan Bahadur Raghunath Rao, and Raghunath Rao was the man who invited 12 wise men to come to his house, and that is where the Congress party was founded. It's not the same Congress party as today, so let's give him the credit for a noble institution at that time. And ever since then, everybody, including Sir S. Subramanya Aiyar and his juniors, they all became active members of the Congress, including V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar. And this is a photograph of the Congress session in the 1890s in Madras city. I have not been able to identify him. Perhaps he was very, very junior at that time, but he did play an active role in organizing the Congress session in the city. But in subsequent years, whenever the Congress met in Madras, he was to be in his element, as we shall see as we go along in this presentation. This is a photograph of the Congress session in 1896, taking place where the Keepwalk Medical College stands today. And once again, he must have played an active role here. But it was in the 1903 Congress session that you really see him coming into his element. He kind of what Mahatma Gandhi did later, where Gandhi said that if you need to be a member of the Congress, you have to pay to become a member of the Congress. So everybody had to make a small token contribution in order to become a member of the party. It was actually Krishnaswamy Aiyar who first thought of the idea. For the 1903 Congress session, he travelled all over South India, starting this membership scheme and enrolling members for the Congress party and collecting funds, issuing receipts in the name of the party. And finally, when the Congress session takes place in 1903 here, he says it's just not enough to meet and debate and pass resolutions. You must also have an exhibition of what this region is capable of doing. So they have an industries exhibition running along with the Congress session. That again was his brainchild, and he organizes it for the Congress. In the 1890s, he was also in the forefront of welcoming Swami Vivekananda to Madras. And in 1897, when Swami Vivekananda comes back from the Parliament of Religions, he is one of the committee that organizes his stay here and his lectures in various places. by the late 1890s, he has become affluent enough, and then he becomes a close friend of Pennathur Subramanya Aiyar, who founded the PS High School. And Pennathur Subramanya Aiyar was a man who believed in leading a good life. If you made a good income, you should also lead a good life to go along with it. So inspired by him, he learns how to ride horses, gets diamond earrings for his wife, and slowly begins to enlarge his scale of living. And by the early 1900s, we find that he has bought 40 grounds in Mylapore and built a beautiful house called Ashrama. And this legend goes that every day he and his friend Sundar Aiyar would walk back from what is today the Alvarpet signal through dense forests, trees, and wild animals used to abound in the area, so they used to talk at the top of their voices in order to ward off the animals. And an Englishman, this may be a purely apocryphal story, but sometimes it is apocrypha that makes history very interesting. An Englishman who lived in the area objected to the noise, and so the two friends, in order to spite him, bought all the property surrounding the Englishman's house and got him to vacate over a period of time. And that is how Ashrama was built. And opposite Ashrama came Sundar Aiyar's house, Sri Bagh, which still stands, on which Amritanjan is still there, and Sri Bagh is also still standing. And this, of course, would have been the beachfront on which the two friends would have spent quite some time. But by 1903, 1904, when Ashrama was built, Krishnaswami Aiyar was getting interested in the beach for some other reasons. And that was the Madras, the South Indian Railway Company, wanting to build a railway track across the beach sands, starting from the High Court beach station and connecting it to Mylapore. The reason that they gave was that there were a number of people from Mylapore who wanted to go to work in Georgetown, and this was the shortest distance by which a railway track could be laid. So it was supposed to be running along the beach sands, and the Corporation of Madras gave permission for it. And the Madras Chamber of Commerce, which was then a very powerful body, was debating the matter as to what should be done, because they were also members of the Madras Corporation. And V. Krishnaswami Aiyar is the man who starts an agitation to prevent the construction of a railway track on the beach. And he holds a mammoth meeting on the beach, addressed by the President of the Madras Chamber of Commerce, Sir George Gough Arbuthnot, whose name we shall see in a short while in another connection. So George Arbuthnot and V. Krishnaswami Aiyar address the audience, and Krishnaswami Aiyar in particular says that this is the soul lung of this city. This is where people come in order to relax. This is where they get fresh air to breathe. What is the purpose in building a railway track across it? And he also says that it's going to be a tremendous eyesore to have this railway track running across. So the railway says, we'll put up hedges to prevent the railway track from being visible, so it will not be an eyesore. Then he says, what about people crossing over the railway track? Will they not die in the process? So the railway says, we will have manned level crossings in this place. We will prevent that from happening. But none of this is going to satisfy V. Krishnaswami Aiyar, so the agitation becomes bigger and bigger over a period of time. Finally, the corporation gets cold feet and withdraws the resolution that a railway track can be built. Now, the statements that he made, that A, the track would be an eyesore and the railway station would be an eyesore, and that it shouldn't be built on this, were exactly the same things that were brought up 80 years later when the MRTS was built. The MRTS, they said, was to be built on the beach. Once again, the railway said, we'll have hedges, we'll build beautiful stations. You can see how wonderful the MRTS stations are today. Finally, they built it on the Buckingham Canal track, and that was the end of the Buckingham Canal as well. But this man had the foresight to protect our beach from a railway track. And can you imagine a railway track running on the beach, what it would have been like today in today's circumstances? While we are talking about the open areas, I may as well mention that he was also dead against the Buckingham Canal coming to Mylapore. He led an agitation for that as well. The Buckingham Canal was constructed. The last bit of the canal was the portion going through Mylapore. And he led an agitation saying that in course of time it will become the biggest sewer in the entire city. The government overruled him and went ahead and constructed the Buckingham Canal, and today if he was around, he'd be able to say, I told you guys, this is what would happen. Anyway, as I said, he was a it was a very senior member of the Madras Bar, and you had two cliques in the Madras Bar. One was called the Egmore lobby and the other was called the Mylapore lobby. The Mylapore lobby was essentially Brahmin dominated, and the Egmore lobby was essentially, as I said, non-Brahmin and Aiyar dominated. So, among the leaders of the second gang was Kasturi Rangayakar, who, having come from Kumbakonam to practice as a lawyer, tried his best to become a member of the Mylapore lobby, but was snubbed by all these people and so went over and joined the Egmore lobby. So, at that point of time, Krishnaswami Aiyar tries to become a member of the Cosmopolitan Club. This is in 1903. And the members of the Cosmopolitan Club take great delight in blackballing him and ensuring that he doesn't become a member. So in revenge, he starts what is called the Mylapore Club in 1903. He says that we don't have to move out of our places, we have a club here. So he has taken land on a 100-year lease for building something and he gives it over to the Mylapore Club, and it starts off as a proprietors club in 1903 and has continued ever since. A very interesting and rather uncharacteristic sidelight of his life was his patronage of the Suguna Vilasa Sabha. The Suguna Vilasa Sabha was started by graduates of the Madras University on the belief that, drama in those days was a very cheap form of entertainment, and those who acted in theatre were people who came from very low strata of society. So many of them would reel onto stage fully drunk. Men and women would exchange private battles on the stage, much to the delight of the audience. Colourful language would be used. So no respectable man ever went to theatre. But it was Pamal Samananda Mudaliar and a group of young graduates who in the 1880s, they start off what is called the Suguna Vilasa Sabha. Only men can act and they have to be graduates in order to act in the place. In fact, the curtains of the Suguna Vilasa Sabha had the Senate House embroidered as a symbol to indicate that it was a graduates theatre organization. And over a period of time, between 1880s and 1903 or so, apart from Samananda Mudaliar's own plays, they were also translating a lot of Shakespeare's plays into Tamil and acting them out. So Romeo Juliet became Jwalita Ramanan, Macbeth became Magapati, Cymbeline became Sarasamgi, Merchant of Venice was Vanipura Vanigan, and so on. Now, As You Like It was translated as Virumbiya Vidame, and it was enacted in the Victoria Public Hall. And news came to be Krishnaswami Aiyar that somebody had translated Shakespeare into Tamil, and he considered it to be sacrilege of the first water. And he says, those exact words that Pamal Samananda Mudaliar uses, what nonsense entered Purina, that such have been committed. But at that time, Krishnaswami Aiyar and his friends were collecting money for building what would later become the Ranade Hall and the Ranade Library and the Shastri Hall. They needed somebody to come and stage plays as a fundraising opportunity. So they invite the Suguna Vilasa Sabha, and the Sabha members are very keen to act out As You Like It in a garden environment because it's a play set in the forest of Arden. So the Mylapore Club premises was a large garden at that time, so they decided that it would be very good. They built a cave and they built a bower in which they could act and things like that. Krishnaswami Aiyar said he would come and stay exactly for an hour. And Suguna Vilasa Sabha's plays normally ran for 4 hours. At the end of 4 hours, they found that he was still seated. And he became a great patron and admirer of all that the Sabha did. He became the president of the Sabha. So he never did anything in half measure. So he either hated issues or he loved issues and he espoused them completely. So he becomes the president of the Suguna Vilasa Sabha, speaks of it only as my Sabha, our Sabha, number Mr. Samandam. So from a time when it was sheer nonsense, he had completely changed over. And he attends almost every staging of theirs and gives them a lot of encouragement, including money at various stages where they need it. This is the first meeting of the Ranade Library after it was built, 1905. Thanks to the funding part funding of the Suguna Vilasa Sabha members. And then in 1905 or 1906, he starts the Venkatramana Ayurveda dispensary. All his donations, I notice, are in 5 figures, nothing smaller than that. So 20,000 rupees was given as the seed money. This is in 1905. And starts off the Venkatramana Ayurveda dispensary because he believes that the native form of medicine is dying out in our country. And one of the people who come to work in the Venkatramana Ayurveda dispensary is Kotishwara Aiyar. Kotishwara Aiyar, who worked as a translator in the Madras High Court, then becomes a translator here to help people understand what is written in the medical treatises, becomes later a translator of the Sanskrit college, becomes a professor of this place as well. And Kotishwara Aiyar's music was something that V. Krishnaswami Aiyar loved. And he would invite him frequently to his house to listen to him sing the Tevaram and the Tiruvachakams, and he would shed tears at the beauty of those lyrics. And it is said that once when he was sitting with a number of friends and Kotishwara Aiyar had gone on for quite some time singing Tevarams, somebody said, "Why don't you sing something else?" And I believe Krishnaswami Aiyar silenced the other man by saying, "Nectar Amrita சாப்பிட்டு இருக்கிற டைம்ல புண்ணாக்கு எடுத்துட்டு வாங்கோ அப்படின்னு சொல்ற மாதிரி இருக்கு நீங்க சொல்றது, எதுக்காக இப்ப வந்து அவர் நிறுத்துறேன்." So they continued with Kotishwara Aiyar's performance. He kind of leaves his imprint on religious matters as well. Apparently father and son delighted in going to temples and terrorizing priests by asking them the mantras that they knew for various occasions. Do you know what to say on this occasion? Do you know? And they knew so much of Sanskrit that the priests would be terrified when when these two came along and asked questions. So he was of the view that the Aryan traditions or the temple traditions were getting lost over a period of time. And it was during this period that Lord Curzon was invited to speak at the Calcutta University's convocation, and he gives a speech which insults the Indian traditions. Curzon was after all a good man but an extremely arrogant man. And so he gave a speech which said that Indians have no tradition whatsoever, you're all weak-minded people. And when the news came to Krishnaswami Aiyar, he collected some of the best incidents in our mythology and our history, compiled them and published them in the form of a book called Arya Charitam, and had them distributed to people so that they would know the greatness of their own community. Similarly, he collected a lot of temple hymns and had them published as Arya Stotramala. This book was distributed free to all the temples, so that the priests would read them and then at least know some of the mantras that they would have to say on various occasions. Then in the 1900s, he comes to know of a very young Swami who has become the Pitadipati of the Kanchi Kamakoti Pita. And he is very afraid that this is after all a young child who has become the Swami, and everybody will be out to swindle him of whatever the mutt possesses. So he gets the High Court of Madras to get the Kanchipuram Madam administered as the court of wards, as a ward of court rather. And so the Kanchipuram Mutt is administered as a ward of court by the High Court till the Mahaperiva becomes a major, and then it is restored to the Madam. So this even the Mahaperiva was to benefit from his foresight. Much later, Mahaperiva was to pay the greatest compliment to V. Krishnaswami Aiyar when he said that what do you need in life? You need spiritual wealth, for which he established the Sanskrit college. You need physical health, for which he established the Ayurveda dispensary, and you need material wealth, for which he established the Indian Bank. So he was to leave his imprint across various, all that was needed. Now we come to probably the best known case in V. Krishnaswami Aiyar's life, 1906, October 20th, when the biggest business house of Madras, Arbuthnot and Company, also on First Line Beach, announces insolvency. It had two partners at that time. One was Sir George Gough Arbuthnot, who, as I said, spoke along with V. Krishnaswami Aiyar in saving the marina, and the other was a man called Patrick McFadden. McFadden was the partner in London, and George Gough Arbuthnot was the partner in charge of Arbuthnot and Company in Madras. On October 20th morning, McFadden threw himself in front of the railway train at the Victoria station in London and committed suicide. And the same afternoon, Arbuthnot and Company declares insolvency here. Thousands of families are ruined by that, because it was the biggest bank in Madras Presidency, and nobody would have anticipated that this bank would have gone under. Among the various famous people who were to lose money was the governor of Madras himself, Sir Arthur Lawley. He became an insolvent because Arbuthnot and Company became an insolvent. Raja Ravi Verma's family lost all its money, and the SPG college where V. Krishnaswami Aiyar studied in Thanjavur also lost all its money and had to shut its doors because of Arbuthnot and Company. So the move was to get Arbuthnot arrested and tried for financial misdemeanor. But because he was an Englishman, all efforts were done by the establishment to prevent him from getting arrested. So the Hindu and B. Krishnaswami Aiyar were the two people who really led the challenge of getting him arrested and then tried as per Indian law. So finally, George Arbuthnot is brought to court and Eardley Norton represents him, with V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar coming up on the opposite side. And the first objection that Norton raises is that there is a legal quibble on which he says that Krishnaswamy Aiyar cannot kind of argue for this case as a lawyer. So Krishnaswamy Aiyar takes off his gown and puts it on his chair and says, as a lawyer I may not be able to argue, but as an aggrieved party I can argue. I have lost money in this case and therefore in this bank, therefore I have every right to argue this case. So the judge, Sir S. Subramania Aiyar, allows him, and so the arguments begin and they carry on for 2 weeks of cross-examination and then a longish trial, at the end of which George Arbuthnot is sentenced to 2 years rigorous imprisonment in Madras. Then he goes back to England, but Arbuthnot closes forever. You know what is very interesting is I was seeing this yesterday. While the trial for Arbuthnot is going on, Krishnaswamy Aiyar has already got all his friends together to start what is called the Indian Bank. So this is October 1906, Arbuthnot announces insolvency. November 1st week 1906, they have already begun meetings to form a bank in Madras called the Indian Bank. So he says that, you know, when the British banks have failed us, it's necessary for Indians to form a bank. So he starts the Indian Bank. And later, Indian Bank buys this building and comes here to occupy. So it's a question, you know, it's like the wheel of history coming to a full close at the end. They come and they still function from here. This building is demolished, but this is where the Indian Bank headquarters is there even now on First Line Beach. Sanskrit College, where we are standing, 1905, a sum total of 65,000 rupees is given to this college, not only from around 45,000 from him, 5,000 from C.P. Ramaswamy Aiyar, and then 12,000 from a close friend of his father's who had passed away and left behind the money to be used for good and charitable works. So this college is started, this is the first building. And Kuppuswamy Shastri has come to Madras to try his luck as a lawyer. Krishnaswamy Aiyar meets him and says that you have no future as a lawyer. You are a great Sanskrit scholar. Stay on and become the principal of this college and take it to great heights. Today, we remember Kuppuswamy Shastri only for his contribution to Sanskrit. I don't think we would have known of him if had he been a lawyer. He becomes a member of the Madras University Senate, sets examination papers for it, and most importantly, gets degrees in Sanskrit and Tamil recognized by the University of Madras. And as I said, Uve Swaminatha Aiyar was one of his friends. He had come to Madras when they were founding the Madras Law Journal and he was coming to the house of Sriram Ramaswamy Mudaliar. Since then, Uve Swaminatha Aiyar and Krishnaswamy Aiyar had been close friends. He got Swaminatha Aiyar to become a professor in the Madras University and Swaminatha Aiyar continues to teach over there. Swaminatha Aiyar, who was to later leave a reminiscence, a beautiful account of V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar's life. Subramania Bharati, who it is said that Krishnaswamy Aiyar really did not like Subramania Bharati's radical ways. That's because as far as he was concerned, he was a moderate in the history of the Congress. He was not an extremist. He believed in constitutional methods of fighting for the country's independence and asserting one's rights. But Bharati was a radical. So the two really did not see eye to eye. But one day G.A. Natesan, his close friend, brings a thin man with a big moustache to his house and says, you must hear him sing. So Bharati begins singing Vande Mataram Embom Yendeyum Thayum Magindulali, that song. And Krishnaswamy Aiyar sheds tears, wants to know who this man is. He is introduced and then he publishes 3 songs of Bharati and has them distributed to people free of cost. That is the first instance of Bharati's poems being published. And it is, of course, today it's a national treasure. Had it not been for him, it wouldn't have happened. Later, of course, Bharati was to fall out with V. Krishnaswamy Aiyar once again. He admired him speak, but when Krishnaswamy Aiyar became a judge, Bharati felt that Krishnaswamy Aiyar had let the side down by accepting a post offered by the English. We come to that very quickly. Friends from the Congress, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, and because of Madan Mohan Malviya and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, he got Right Honorable V.S. Srinivasa Shastri to come from Kumbakonam and settle in Madras, become a member of the Servants of India Society and carry on from there. But because he was a friend of Gokhale's, he was, as I said, a moderate. So the extremists like Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal, they did not like Krishnaswami Aiyar. Not that he minded. In fact, he delighted in the fact that some people didn't like him and he had a good fight to carry on all the time. In 1909, he loses his wife, who has been an invalid for quite some time. Aiyar Noi, I assume that it's a disease of the liver, from what I am able to see. And it is a big shock to him because his family is still young. His son is just, his eldest daughter, Balasundari, is just 20. Then there is K. Balasubramaniam, and then there is Subbalakshmi Ammal, Savitri Ammal, Saraswati Ammal, and K. Chandrasekhar. These were the 6 children. So they were all, the youngest child was just 5 when the mother passes away. And Chandrasekhar's memoirs are so beautiful, very moving. He says that one day early in the morning he came and woke us up and said, "Your mother is dead, come and see her." So this was, it must have been a tremendous shock to the children. But he is already a diabetic. In fact, diabetes is something that runs in the family. His father was heavily diabetic. His brother was not diabetic, but he was a tuberculosis patient. And he had died just 6 months before his wife died. So it was a year that was a very black year for him. But it was during this year that the Congress party was coming down to Madras for one more session. And he had to organize the Congress party session as well. So his brother's dying and the Congress party session in Madras almost happens kind of in parallel with each other. But he manages both at the same time. This is the wonder of the man. And once his wife dies, his spirit is kind of dimmed a little. And he realizes that he's got a responsibility towards his children. And the government is pressurizing him to become a judge of the Madras High Court. So in 1909, he gets elevated to the bench and becomes a judge. As a judge, according to P.S. Sivaswamy Aiyar, he could not stand fools. Of course, according to Sir Arthur Collins, he had a lofty contempt for all people. Anybody who had less than normal intelligence, he couldn't deal with it. So as a judge, he made plenty of enemies because even before the lawyer had begun to explain what the case was all about, he had absorbed the whole thing and he felt that these were all trivialities and the case could move on quickly. So Sivaswamy Aiyar writes that when he spoke, he did not like dogs barking. But when others spoke, he continued barking all the time. This was his definition of Krishnaswamy Aiyar speaking. And so as a judge, he made plenty of enemies. But he was very quick in his decision making, so it was much to the relief of the plaintiffs who came to the court. And in 1911, at the invitation of the governor of Madras, he becomes a member of the governor's executive council. This is when Subramanya Bharati writes, "Oi Krishnaswamy Aiyare, enna karyam seidu vittir? What have you done? You espoused our cause and finally you have gone to the very same people whom we were fighting against. You became a member of the governor's executive council." So he attacks him tooth and nail, but Krishnaswamy Aiyar obviously does not respond. His position does not allow him to respond to that. And as the member of the governor's executive council, he continues his work. One of the last cases that he is involved in is the first obscenity case of Madras, when a woman brings out a Telugu book written originally in the 18th century called Radhika Santwanamu, which looks at sex from the point of a woman. Bengaluru Nagaratnama is the woman who publishes the book. The government of Madras wants to ban it on the grounds of obscenity. Krishnaswamy Aiyar's one of the last notings on the file is that I am going to Delhi. When I come back, I would like the book to be examined by a proper Telugu expert like the Raja of Manakal, and then an opinion to be passed. But that doesn't happen because he is going to Delhi to participate in the grand coronation darbar of King George V. It is the first and last time that a reigning king emperor is coming to India for a coronation darbar, and that is happening in Delhi, which is also going to be declared as a national capital. So it's a great event, and he is invited to come and receive the order of the Companion of the Indian Empire, the CIE. So he travels to Delhi and stays there. And 2 days before the actual investiture, there is a dress rehearsal. And everybody is asked to put on their ceremonial dress in order to kind of seat and plan so that everything can go as per true British clockwork. And when he puts on his dress, some of the silk threads, which are probably heavily starched, they pierce his thigh and twist themselves into his flesh. And because he was heavily diabetic, by next day morning, septicemia had set in. He was in pain, he had fever, was forming in the area where the injury had happened. People who had come to visit him realized that he is quite ill and he is unable to participate in the investiture ceremony. One of his words is that he would like Dr. Nanjun Rao to come and attend on him. Nanjun Rao was a famous doctor of Madras living on South Mada Street. He had founded the Ramakrishna Mission and Krishnaswami Aiyar had helped him to found the Ramakrishna Mission. He doesn't attend the investiture. The family in Madras gets to know that he doesn't attend the investiture through the newspaper reports. And there is no communication other than that. So some of the family members leave to go and meet him somewhere midway along with the doctor. So he is brought back in a train, the family members leave, they meet somewhere midway at a station, they bring him to Madras. Having brought him here, he dies from what I can see a fairly horrible and lingering death, because he doesn't die immediately. An operation is performed in ashrama itself, in the central courtyard of ashrama, according to the medical facilities that were available in those days. So a doctor, Major Gibbard, comes and cuts open the injury in order to bleed it and let out the pus, but that doesn't help. He is highly enfeebled, and by December 27th, he is on his last legs. And among his last words was to call his son K. Chandrasekharan and ask him to give a kiss on his cheek. This boy is just 8 years old and he comes and plants a kiss on his father's cheek, and next day in the morning he passes away. So he was just 48 years of age when he died. The imagination boggles at what he would have achieved had he lived on to the normal span of life of people like Sriram Aiyar or C.P. Ramaswamy Aiyar and so on and so forth. And this was the same house where the governor, Sir Arthur Lawley, had been received with a 21-gun salute booming from the compound, and with Subbalakshmi Ammal, the second daughter, playing the hostess to Lady Lawley. This was the same house where the governor comes and makes an offer for a state funeral, but the family refuses because they are so orthodox in their outlook. And then, as the funeral proceeds, every 1 hour there is a gun salute from Fort St. George. Throughout the day, 15 guns are fired to commemorate the passing of a member of the Governor's Executive Council, and finally, B. Krishnaswamy Aiyar is cremated. Then begins the debate of what is the memorial that could be offered to his memory. And he, in his lifetime, was completely against statues. When Sir P. Muthuswamy Aiyar, the first Indian judge of the Madras High Court, had passed away, there was a move to erect a statue for him in the High Court. He was one of the people who had opposed it tooth and nail, saying that it is not in the Indian custom to erect a statue. But when it came to him, everybody agreed that a statue was what needed to be erected. The Hindu, as I said, did not see eye to eye with him. So the Hindu made fun of the fact and said that, a man who never wanted a statue, finally we are erecting a statue for the same personality. And Sir S. Subramanya Aiyar was the man who carried the day. In fact, it is said that at the funeral he broke down and wept and said, I had always thought that you would be present at my funeral. I never thought that I would have to watch you go first. And so he gives a very emotional speech and he breaks down and weeps at Rajaji Hall and says that only a statue for him would be the best memorial for him. And the Hindu also makes fun of that and says, since when have judges of the High Court begun to exhibit emotion in public? Finally, a statue is erected. The Suguna Vilasa Sabha alone contributes 1,000 rupees for the erection of the statue in 1912. Sculpted by Francis Derwent Wood, one of the best known sculptors of England at that time. It becomes the first statue for an Indian on the Marina Beach. There was never any statue before that. This is the first statue. And rather interestingly, the next statue to come up was that of Sir S. Subramanya Aiyar, who had championed his statue. After that came the statue of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who was their close friend. Several years later, the fourth friend was also to have a statue standing in the same direction, Uve Swaminath Aiyar. Swaminath Aiyar should have got a statue on the other side along with all the other Tamil scholars. But in 1968, political considerations were based on caste. So when Tamil scholars got statues, Swaminath Aiyar was alone not given an honor of a statue there. But his Kiva Jagannathan and others decided that so what if it doesn't happen there, we'll put him on this side. So he stands on the same side as V. Krishnaswami Aiyar, all four friends almost standing together, short distance away, a fifth friend and admirer, Annie Besant. So it's a kind of one friend society. After all, he had contributed to her Banaras Hindu University as well in a big way. So all five of them standing together, and God knows what they communicate with each other after we've all got to sleep. Thank you so much for your patience. Thanks a lot.